Thanks for joining us tonight. Our focus is on spending a little time on the topic of national parks. National parks are great for our soul. They're great for our country, very important for our country. They tell important stories. Stories about Black Americans at Fort Chicago National Memorial, a park we're working with to help tell that story. Stories about the incarceration of Japanese Americans at Manzanar National Historic Site, another park we're working with to help tell those stories. National parks also protect really important natural and cultural features, of course, and one of those parks, a real gem, a huge gem, in fact, Death Valley National Park is with us tonight, and we're looking forward to learning a little bit more about what's going on in Death Valley National Park right now, and we have Superintendent Mike Reynolds with us and some of his staff and local partners. And Mike, thanks so much for hosting us tonight. We are really looking forward to learning a little bit about what's going on in the park, and tell us where you are and tell us what's going on.
All right. Well, I don't know if everybody can hear me, but I'll just start rambling as if you can. Thanks, Kevin. So everybody, welcome to Death Valley National Park. You are here visiting during the summertime, which is, in my opinion, the absolute best season. In fact, June is the best month to visit Death Valley because it's both hot, but you also have long daylight hours. So I'm really glad you guys could all join us from so far away, all over the place. This Zoom thing is crazy fascinating to me. So also very excited to join Fun for People in Parks during happy hour at Death Valley, although there's something strange about this happy hour that just doesn't feel right. But anyway, I hope you are enjoying happy hour. I'm glad you could join us. You might know that Death Valley National Park is closed for COVID-19. However, we'll be opening on Fridays. It's good timing. We'll be opening on Friday for day use, and 2 weeks later, most of the rest of the park will reopen. So we're looking forward to that. And then you can once again join us here in Death Valley. I wanted to give you just a little snapshot of where we are right now. So we're at Furnace Creek, which is right in the middle of Death Valley. And Patrick is going to do a zoom around just to see what you can see. So what you're seeing is the sunset lighting up the funeral range from Furnace Creek. You're passing by Navarres Peak at 3,000 feet. You're seeing some palm trees in the front, which is the Furnace Creek Ranch. Behind that is Winters Peak, which is just over 5,000 feet. And we're actually below sea level here at Furnace Creek. So that's the same height as the Grand Canyon, what you're looking at there. If you keep panning across, you can see some of the spectacular colors of the funeral range here in Death Valley. And just off to the right, you can see the Furnace Creek Inn for the Oasis at Furnace Creek. So hope you guys can see that. That's what we're looking at. It's very exciting to see every day. And that is where we are right now. You might say, why are you at a hotel instead of, in a comfortable office? Because it is 102 degrees right now. The reason for that is our internet connectivity at the park is incredibly poor, so we're not able to do Zoom. So this is actually my first Zoom meeting, so apologies for that. If I look confused, that's because I've not been able to participate in a Zoom before, but the Xanterra and the Furnace Creek Ranch folks here were kind enough to let us borrow their internet to participate in this Zoom with the Fun for People in Parks. So that is where we are. Like I mentioned, the temperature today is only 102. Yesterday, believe it or not, was a high in the 90s, which is almost 3 degrees short of an all-time cold record for June 8th. We have had, in the 5 years I've been here in this role, over 50 heat records. So where the hottest temperature was above what it had ever been on that date, or the nighttime temperature didn't go below 100 or what it had been on that date, we have had 0 cold records in that time. So thank you, climate change, for that experience. But so right now it's only 102, which is actually fairly comfortable for here. Like Kevin said, my name's Mike Reynolds. I'm the superintendent, lucky enough to be the superintendent here at Death Valley. A couple of my colleagues are here with me today. This is, go ahead.
I'm Patrick Taylor, Chief of Interpretation and Education.
And also on the phone, we have Dr. Kevin Wilson. I don't know if you can see Kevin or flash over to Kevin. Hi, Kevin. So that's who we're here for. The guy here from the park today. Like I mentioned, Death Valley is awesome in the summertime. And I know people laugh at me and say, oh, you're kind of a freak. That may be true. However, 1.7 million people came to visit Death Valley last year in 2019, which was the 4th year in a row of an all-time record. So it's lots of people coming here to see Death Valley. And this fact, I guarantee, will surprise at least one of you. August and September are the 2 busiest months in Death Valley. So the highest visitation of the whole year, which is pretty even throughout the year. highest in August and September. The reason for that, heat tourism. So who knew that was a thing? But people actually come here to experience the extreme temperatures. So, and a lot of that, about 70% of those folks that come are coming from Europe to experience the heat. But there's so much to see. One of the other reasons Death Valley is awesome in the summer, it's also when, much like where you live, wildlife wakes up. You see snakes, desert tortoise. This is actually a Pacific flyover zone, so it's late spring and early fall. Lots of birds flying over. We saw pronghorn antelope on the valley floor for the first time ever in recorded history over the last couple of months. They're moving into the park, so migration down to these lower elevations. Also in the summer, and one of the reasons I think I secretly like it, well, I don't so secretly like it, but I like it, is we have such crazy weather. So most days it just chugs along and it's really hot, and then you'll have these crazy windstorms or just insane rainstorms, which cause flash flooding events and all kinds of stuff. So summer's really exciting. In fact, just within the last month, we've had 2 major earthquakes, a 7.1 on the north part of the park. We had a 5.5 just on the west side of the park last week. We experienced a major windstorm that ripped the roof off of a couple of houses in there, where we live over there. We had 6 record-setting heat temperatures over the last 2 weeks. Of course, the park's been closed for the COVID, and of course, the national outcry for equality and civil unrest associated with that will certainly impact everything as we look forward into the future. So lots of things happening just this month. We're going to talk about some of a few of the awesome projects we've worked on with Fun for People in Parks and Death Valley Natural History Association over the next few minutes, and looking forward to the question and answer part. And I'm challenging each of you to come up with good questions. I know Bob Hansen has 1,000 questions, so looking forward to those. I'm going to turn it back over to Kevin Hendricks. Thanks.
Mike, thanks so much for the intro. It looks beautiful there. What a great scene behind you. Thanks again. I know you have some words for us later, so we'll come back to you in a little bit. In the meantime, though, I know that you and your staff recently produced some videos that we are curious about taking a look at. We know that you leveraged some funds to accomplish these because of the support the Fund for People in Parks has given you. It's not a project that we've directly funded, but it's sort of a spin-off benefit of working with us and you leveraging some additional funds. So congratulations. And I want to take a look at the intro video. I think Katie is going to cue up the intro video for us.
Welcome to Death Valley National Park. My name is Mike Reynolds. I'm the superintendent here at Death Valley National Park, and I want to welcome each of you. This is my favorite national park, and I feel really lucky to be able to live and work here because there's so many things that you can see and do. Anything you could ever imagine in any national park, you can probably find some example of that here. Death Valley is so big and so vast and covers everything from 282 feet below sea level to 11,000 feet. Plants at every elevation. The weather is perfect most of the year. There's hiking, there's camping, there's wildlife, history, the cultural history. Just take mining history alone. So Death Valley National Park has over 17,000 abandoned mining features. If you want to go learn about historic mining, everywhere you go in Death Valley, you're going to see that. If you want to see some of the darkest night skies of anywhere on Earth, where you can see the Milky Way and all the stars laid out just like right there, Death Valley is a great place to see that. Whatever it is you're interested in, Death Valley has something for you to enjoy. I hope you find something here that's going to make you want to come back. I promise you that you will. There's so much to see, and I hope that you'll become stewards for Death Valley National Park. And anytime you hear about Death Valley, it'll be a place that you can connect with, and I also hope that you can come back and see us at Death Valley again.
Nice job on the video, Mike. I am eager to see the other ones too, but that was really nice. The fund has helped Death Valley and a local partner, the Death Valley Natural History Association, with about 12 projects over the years. We've completed 8. We have 4 in the works right now. David Blacker with Death Valley Natural History Association is going to say a couple of words about Dante's View, but I just want to mention one that is really kind of a neat standout project. The moving rocks, the sliding rocks at the racetrack playa. We had a neat project working with the park to help tell the story of the sliding rocks, and worked with our contractor, Dan DiVittorio, and produced some really nice exhibits for the racetrack playa. I was going to pull up a photo or two, but I'm one of the folks that was experiencing technical difficulties, so I'm sorry I can't do that. But a neat project up on the racetrack fly-up. And with that, Patrick, I think you're up next. You're going to tell us a little bit about some of the historic resources in the park. We have a small project at one of those. So, Patrick, welcome. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Yeah, thank you. Again, my name is Patrick Taylor. I'm the Chief of Interpretation and Education here at Death Valley. This is my second stint in Death Valley, and that's actually a pretty common trend. If you talk to a lot of employees here, there's the kind of smart employees like Mike and I who work here, then leave, and then come back. Then there's the really smart employees like Kevin Wilson, you'll talk to in a minute, David Blacker, who know just get here and stay here. But this is my second stint. I love it here. Mike talked about all the diversity and just a fantastic park, and we're going to highlight, at least in my presentation, a couple of those. So Katie is going to work some slides for me, and the first spot we're going to talk about is the Keane Wonder Mine. So if you can go ahead to the next slide, that's the photograph. So the Keane Wonder Mine is one of the more important historic sites in the park. It's a gold mining camp, and that's actually unique in Death Valley. You know, a lot of people, when they think of a mining site, gold is the only mineral they really associate with it. But there's quite a few minerals out there in Death Valley. You know, borax was probably really the most economically important one that drove a lot of the policies and decisions of the park. However, we do have Keane Wonder. That's a pretty cool mine. The gold was discovered there in 1904 by a man named Jack Keane, and it was so wonderful that they named it the Keane Wonder Mine. Over its lifetime, it produced about $1 million worth of gold. In its heyday, in the very early 1900s, it was pulling out about $2,000 a day, and that's pretty good for 100 years ago. And it operated until 1942 when it stopped. It was a fairly popular attraction for the park, but Katie, if you can click on to the next slide. It was a fairly popular attraction to the park, but you can get an idea with buildings like that, when they're left all alone, problems might start to arise. And so in 2007, the site was shut down for some restoration work that primarily involved stabilizing some of the buildings. There was a lot of soils out there that needed to be sampled. As a lot of you probably know, when they're extracting the minerals, they use things like mercury that aren't necessarily great to have blowing around when people are recreating in it. So the site closed down for a little over a decade, and it reopened in 2017. One of the reasons this site is so popular is because of how accessible it is to the general public. It's so close to major roads. A lot of our mining camps are way out, you know, after miles and miles of rough 4x4 road. So they're fairly well protected just by their location, but Keane Wonder Mine was different. So its accessibility attracted people to it. There were the safety concerns we closed it down for. We mitigated most of those, but when we opened, we realized one of the problems we ran into was just the basic navigation. So Katie, if you can click over to the next slide. Hopefully you can all see it in this photo. Way down on the left side, if you're seeing it the same way I am, you can see the parking lot. So it's a little light tan colored section. There's a couple vehicles parking in it. Then there's these trails that start to switch back up along the mountain. And these two towers you can see in front of you are actually one of the main defining features at Keane Wonder Mine. It's the aerial tramway they would use like a ski lift to move the minerals and the ore down the mountain, and probably some of them up the mountain when they were going to work shifts in the day. So those were stabilized. And once you get up on the hillside, it's fairly clear what the trails are that the visitors should follow. But way back at the beginning, near the parking lot, people don't necessarily see that trail. So they park and just go whichever direction they feel like going. Most of the most serious hazards had been mitigated, but there were still some areas that weren't the safest for visitors, especially for children, to go explore and climb on. So the project we're working on this year is a pretty simple a fence that's kind of in line with what you'd expect at a sign like this, with old rusted metal, so railroad ties that help people get delineated and focus towards the trail. So it'll protect the site, but more importantly, make sure visitors have a fun time coming up to see these aerial tramways rather than wandering off out some desert alluvial fan and not seeing much at all. So that's a project we're very excited to work on this year. It's a neat collaborative project. Of course, all of our projects involve different members of the staff, but this one in particular, it's got members of interpretation, members of maintenance, members of resources, all kind of contributing in different ways to make sure it helps everybody the most. Okay, if we can move on to the next slide, we're going to jump topics a little bit. And I'm actually going to pause for just a moment to share a personal story. So I first worked with the Fund for People in Parks several years ago when I worked at Lava Beds National Monument. The Fund for People in Parks helped produce a video for us back then that focused on Crystal Ice Cave, but really was an introduction to the entire park. And as part of that, there was a cinematographer that came out and he videoed some of the night skies of Lava Beds National Monument, which were pretty amazing. And afterwards, when I saw his videos, I thought, I didn't know you could just take pictures of the sky like that. And now my main hobby is going out and do astrophotography. And that was one of the draws for me to come back to Death Valley National Park. So I just bring that all up to share that I know that primarily the purpose of the fund is to interact with the public, but also as a member of the National Park Service, watching one of those videos kind of redirected my life and a lot of the work I do that's very much focused on night skies now. So I wanted to thank you guys all for that. But to move now specifically into Death Valley night skies, I wanted to share this for two reasons. One, it's a project that we're working on currently this year, and another one is just as a little prepper for some potential projects you might see down the road. So Death Valley National Park is a gold tier international dark sky park. There's not a whole lot of those, and that designation is based somewhat on how visible the stars are from your site, of course, but just as importantly, it's about what you're doing to protect night skies and educate the public about night skies. So if we can go to the next slide. Death Valley spends a lot of our time in our training focusing on night sky training for rangers. So this is one we did last September with staff, not just from Death Valley, but from Sequoia, from Manzanar, and a few other parks kind of in our vicinity. Everybody came out here and started to learn about not just how you identify constellations, because that's neat, but that doesn't really change how people interact with the world, but really about light pollution, why the night sky matters both to humans and wildlife and everything like that. What we're finding more and more within Death Valley, and this is pretty common and similar across all national parks, is night sky programs are what draws the biggest crowds. So if we said, name the most important features of Death Valley National Park, most of us would probably say Badwater or the sand dunes, things like that. If you ask the public, what are you here to see? They're gonna say to see that night sky. So if we do a night sky program, if you can click to the next slide, Katie. If we do a night sky program, we will easily get 100, 200, 300 people show up to it. Whereas if we do a program at Badwater or Golden Canyon, we'll get maybe 30 people, maybe 50 people on a really, really good day. So there's this huge draw to come out and see it. However, as you can imagine, most national parks were not developed or thought out in a way that was compatible with doing large group gatherings at night. So the project we did this year, which was a relatively easy to achieve, but extremely successful one, programs by purchasing new laser pointers. So hopefully you can see in this photo, there's a green laser beam. That's a ranger pointing out at a constellation. I think it was Orion. Also, we purchased these specialized red lights. So that red trail you can see headed back behind the group are these little hockey puck lights that are red. It's very important you use red lights in the night sky programs. We were able to purchase rechargeable ones rather than single-use disposable battery lights. We were able to build up a few of our older telescopes that had fallen down over the years and purchased one new bigger one for deep sky viewing. So these programs have an immediate impact on everybody and very different than a lot of them kind of expect to get. Again, they come out here thinking they're going to learn what Orion and the Big Dipper are, but they walk away with the sense of, oh, I can actually make a difference about light pollution. I can help the natural world just by turning off my porch light when I'm not out in the backyard. So again, a very, very easy project for us to achieve, at least in comparison to some of the others. It's fantastic to work with you guys. I've had the good fortune to work with DVNHA and for Fund for People in Parks as kind of a trifecta on this, and it's just been a great relationship. And I very much appreciate it. And by behalf of the public that I get to answer the comments for, they love this park. The natural beauty of it is what tends to draw them here, of course, but lots of times they don't know what they need until they get here, and what the Fund for People in the Park provides really makes that happen. So thank you.
Hey, Patrick, thanks so much for the information on Keane Wonder Mine and on your night sky programs. I can't believe the popularity of your night sky programs. That's amazing. As you mentioned, I know David Blacker and the Death Valley Natural History Association are big partners in so many projects we've worked on and so much you do there at the park. I want to introduce David Blacker, the Executive Director of Death Valley Natural History Association. David, welcome. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us today.
Hi, Kevin. It's my pleasure. It's you know, with all the social distancing and things going on, of course, Death Valley invented social distancing, but it's nice to be able to see people's faces. It's been kind of lonely here at the office for a while. You know, you got to see the great background behind Mike and Patrick, and I'll show you if you want to look over my shoulder. This is the scenic view I have inside my office at Cow Creek. I'm in the park too. I'm below sea level as well, but it's about 76 degrees in my office instead of 102. So we'll let, I know Mike, if Mike was here right now in my office, he'd be wearing a coat. So it's always good to see everybody. And I can't begin to thank the Fund for People in Parks enough. It has been such a great partnership that we've had with you, that we have with the park. And part of what that makes it work is the great relationship that the three of our organizations have. You could not find better people than Patrick and Mike to work with at the Park Service. They're always aware of what's going on. They always look for a way to say yes when we come up with projects. It's really an amazing partnership. And you said earlier that we had done 12, or that we're currently have on our 12th project, I believe. But most people won't realize that that's about $375,000 worth of funding over the years. And that's money for projects that, to be honest with you, might not have happened without your help. I always have to praise the Park Service and their ability to leverage money and to be entrepreneurial with these type of things when they happen. Like with the thermometer project, where we were able to get matching funds that were able to pay for that video while we were working on other projects. So it's always wonderful to see you guys. And I just wanted to show you a few things, a little bit about DVNHA and some of the great projects for all the folks that are watching. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, and we'll see if I can make the technology work. All right. I'm getting a thumbs up. So we must be looking. So Death Valley Natural History Association is the official nonprofit partner for Death Valley National Park. We've been around since 1954. And since 1954, we've given about $6.5 million in goods and services back to Death Valley National Park. We raise that through fundraising. We also have a bookstore operation. We have a web store, all of those kind of things. And we have really two kinds of projects that we work on. We work on what we call reoccurring projects, which are projects like with Kevin Wilson, you'll find out about in a minute, helping to support the Devil's Hole Pupfish on a yearly basis. But we also have our Death Valley Rocks education program, which provides transportation grants for schools from fourth graders all the way up into high school, not only from local schools, but from schools in the Las Vegas area and in Southern California to come up here for a day-long science-based education project. And it has been a fantastic project. We've had more than 1,000 students come up. It was always amazing to me to find out that the biggest sticking point between getting kids here to study science was just the cost of a bus. And so we've managed to do some incredible things with that, and with Brandy Stewart, who's the park's education specialist. But usually with Fund for People in Parks, what we have is what we call more of our unique projects, which are individual projects that may pop up every year or in different years, but aren't set up for long-term funding. And of course, working with the fund, probably our bellwether project, the one that we show everybody, is of course our Dante's View project. For those who may have been up to Dante's View before this, you will know that it was just kind of a paved area, sloping sides, and you could if you weren't paying attention, you probably could have just walked right off the side of the cliff. But with the support of Fund for People in Parks and matching money that the Park Service had, they were able to put in a really incredible viewing area and parking area there. Now you can see that nice rock wall, the fantastic exhibit panels we have there now. All of this would have only been possible with that extra funding that we were able to get from the fund. You'll see a couple of my favorite people here. Of course, working with Mike has just been absolutely fantastic, and we look forward to working with him. And of course, Bob, we're always happy whenever we can see him. And it was really a highlight of my career when I got to help cut the ribbon opening up Dante's View. But besides the Dante's View project, which was a huge project that garnered a lot of attention, the Fund for People in Park doesn't wander away from the less, what I would call the less sexy programs. Like Patrick was saying, the impact that laser pointers can have is incredible. The impact that being able to fix a telescope has is huge. And things like this is the bronze relief map that we did at Dante's View, which was ended up being the centerpiece of the project. But then you also signs. This is probably the latest project we're working on, and the one that we're hoping to finish up probably here at the end of the summer. The park has dozens of entries into the park, and you'll see this is just basically a 2-rut dirt road literally in the middle of nowhere in the largest national park in the lower 48 states. And if you were to drive across that cattle guard 6 months ago, you might not have even known that you were in Death Valley National Park anymore. You wouldn't have known what rules to obey. You wouldn't have known that you can't just drive off in the brush. But now, thanks to the Fund for People in Parks, everybody gets to know when they actually cross into the park and know how to monitor their behavior when they're here. And I can't say enough for the fund and the great projects we've worked on. And I look forward to working with Kevin and with Katie and doing many more projects in the future.
Thanks, David. Hey, thanks so much, David. Thanks for the overview of Dante's View and everything else you're working on there. It's been great working with you, and we look forward to working with you more in the future. One of the resources at the park that has always really intrigued me is the Devil's Hole Pupfish. I think it's something that the public doesn't generally see or hear much about. And so tonight we have the park's aquatic ecologist, Kevin Wilson, on with us to tell us a little bit about the Devil's Hole Pupfish. Kevin, welcome. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Great. Thank you, Kevin, for the introduction. Yes, I'm an aquatic ecologist for the park. I'm also in my home office here in Pahrump in climate-controlled 76 degrees like David. And the reason being is that we have a satellite office here in Pahrump that allows us to really work on the Devil's Hole program. We have a fully functional lab. We also have a space for staff that work specifically with Devil's Hole and the other aquatic habitats in Death Valley. So I'm going to first start here with a PowerPoint and quickly describe Devil's Hole, its ecosystem, and the coolness of it. Okay, so Devil's Hole is actually located approximately...
Kevin, we can't see your screen if you're trying to share a screen.
Oh.
Go ahead and try again.
Okay, hold on. Let's close this. So I went to share screen. Share.
You're good.
Looks like I'm in now. This is my really first Zoom myself. 1 second. Okay. Can we see it now? Looks like
Perfecto.
good to go. So Devil's Hole is located about 70 kilometers east of Furnace Creek headquarters. And this is due to a 1952 proclamation by President Truman that added 40 acres surrounding Devil's Hole to Death Valley National Monument at the time. And in the proclamation, there was specific language that stated that this land should be saved because of the unique ecosystem and the curious pupfish that lives within it, which was really ahead of its time, that it was looking at the ecosystem and not just the fish to protect. So the aerial view you have here that you can see to your left, and I'm circling where Devil's Hole is actually located. So as we get closer, you see that the top photo is really a window into the aquifer, and that is Devil's Hole, the ecosystem. It's about 3 meters by 20 meters wide and in length. And then the bottom is a cross section that's rotated about 90 degrees clockwise that shows how deep it is. We don't know how deep it is. It's 133 meters or 436 feet by divers. They went down that deep and did not see a bottom. So Devil's Hole is also an extreme environment for the pupfish that lives there and also the other flora and fauna. It's warm. It's 93 degrees all the time. And it's also low in oxygen. I have 2.5 to 3 milligrams per liter. What does that mean? Well, most aquatic systems are between 8 and 12 milligrams per liter. And it's also energy limited. So the photo to the left shows Devil's Hole in the winter when sunlight reaches the water surface. And then the photo to the right shows it in summer when sunlight reaches the water surface for a maximum of about 4.5 hours. And we can see increased algal production, which increases the food web. What's also unique about Devil's Hole, and I'll point this out with my cursor, is Devil's Hole has a tidal cycle or an intertidal zone. It actually has 2 peaks and 2 troughs during a 24-hour period. And that just speaks to, you know, how large this aquifer system is. Now the pupfish. So the Devil's Hole pupfish was first listed in 1967 under the Endangered Species Preservation Act and grandfathered in 1973 to the Endangered Species Act. And one really cool fact is that the Devil's Hole pupfish lives in the smallest known habitat for a vertebrate species on this planet. It also lacks pelvic fins, and the idea behind that, it doesn't need to produce the fins because the water is so warm, and it really should think about making babies. It's also small, about 1 inch long as adults. They lay 1 egg per spawning event, which is much different than, say, your trout or salmon that broadcast scan, you know, thousands and millions of eggs. And it's also a short-lived fish. It lives between 8 and 14 months, so it really has to grow up in a hurry. So a little bit more of a history. So I titled this A Species in Crisis, and this was due to groundwater pumping that started in the late 60s and the early 70s in the surrounding ash meadows. A certain well was actually built right on the boundary between private land and national monument land. And when they turned on that pump, the water level here declined in Devil's Hole immediately, and the population followed suit. The water dropped, the population dropped. So there were several court injunction, and it finally led to the Supreme Court with a decision in 1976 in favor of the Devil's Hole pupfish in the federal government. And so it really was due to that 1952 proclamation that stated that the ecosystem is critical for the fish. I also put up this slide about 2 popular bumper stickers that people would put on their vehicles back at that in the 60s and 70s. Kill the pupfish and save the pupfish. The sentiments are both of those sentiments are still alive today in the local community. So on the y-axis, we see abundance. So basically the number of pupfish. We count pupfish via scuba underwater. The y-axis is time. So we've been counting pupfish since 1972. The blue line represents typically a fall maximum, 450, 550 fish. And then in the spring, when the population was lowest due to limited food, was about 150 to 250 fish. So I talked briefly about that first crisis due to groundwater pumping. Well, if you look closely at the figure in about 1996, we see the population starting to decline for yet to be determined reasons. We actually hit a low of 38 individuals in the spring of 2006 and 2007, but our lowest count that we have was in the spring of 2013, and I think I turned gray overnight after that count. You can see some scuba divers here taken in the 1970s. We do have a little bit more technical diving currently. And then finally, I'd like just to point out where we are today. So that red circle at the end of the figure to the right there shows some of our more recent counts. And so we're in an upward trajectory. We're still well below our historical levels, so we're cautiously optimistic for the future. So I'm gonna end and unshare. And so as I mentioned, you know, and I hope you have the sense of how large the aquifer system is that Devil's Hole is kind of that window in. So Katie's going to cue up a video, and this was taken from the July 5th Ridgecrest 7.1 magnitude earthquake. So I'll narrate a little bit, but I guess go ahead and start, Kate. Kate. Doesn't look like it's beginning though. Okay. Seems to be buffering a little bit, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah, it started a little bit, but basically this is an underwater view, and you can see that the shelf is being exposed. So this is an opposite view. Okay, here we go. So there's a big splash up at the top of your screen. I mean, that was 15 feet high, and there's an owl that just flew off. So you can really see the waves generated from that earthquake. And here again, the shelf is being exposed. I think I saw a couple of fish swimming for their lives. So I think that's pretty good, Katie. That just really shows how, I mean, we have earthquakes around the world that will impact Devil's Hole, but that 7.1 was a tremendous impact. So thank you.
Kevin, thanks. That was really interesting about the fish and about the aquifer and the earthquake. Great footage with that owl flying off. Pretty cool. Well, we're about wrapped up. Mike, we're gonna hand the microphone back to you for a little bit to say a few more words and help us wrap it up. Mike?
Thanks, Kevin, two Kevins. And I know Kevin talked a lot about the pupfish. I got to tell you, one of the coolest things about Devil's Hole with the earthquakes, and we saw that the thing happen with the owl and the sloshing, is that anytime there's an earthquake anywhere in the Pacific Rim, so a major earthquake in Japan or Alaska or Chile or, of course, the United States will slosh the water in Devil's Hole. And that is part of their survival mechanism. If the water didn't slosh and bring the nutrients down into the hole, they wouldn't survive. It's just one of the most fascinating places I've ever seen. So one of the oddities here at Death Valley. Another, and Kevin asked if I could talk about one more project. This is actually one of my all-time favorite projects, not surprising because it has to do with temperature again. But as I mentioned earlier, lots of people come here for heat tourism to experience Death Valley in the summertime. In the summertime, 70% of those folks are from Europe. And so anybody who knows anything about looking at the temperature in Europe, if you've traveled there, you're confused by it. And why is that? Because it's in centigrade and we mostly know Fahrenheit. So the thermometer that's on the front of the Furnace Creek Visitor Center, which is perfectly positioned so that you can see big lettering and it's nicely labeled and sits just under the Furnace Creek Visitor Center sign, is Fahrenheit only. And so all these people are coming this summer and then trying to type in to convert it. So an awesome partnership with the Fund for People in Parks, Death Valley Natural History Association, and some matching funds from the National Park Service's Centennial Fund came together to replace that thermometer with a new one that depicts centigrade so that now everybody's able to enjoy their favorite temperatures. And also, although it's not there yet, we're only halfway through the project, we'll show some scenery that helps explain to people, like you're sitting here below sea level and it feels really hot, but you can look right now. Patrick and I are looking up at Telescope Peak at 11,000 feet, which is 50 degrees cooler than right here. So the new art will artfully depict what elevation does and what you can experience here in Death Valley. So anyway, I don't know, Katie, if there's a picture of that somewhere to show of the thermometer. There it is, taken on a 114 degree day, which if you're from Europe, you would say, oh, 45 degrees. So there we go. So that's a cool project. And I do want to just wrap up because I know I've gone on a bit long, but thank you so much for joining us for Happy Hour today. I know it's time for Q&A, but I want to give a huge specific thank you to the Fund for People in Parks and Death Valley Natural History Association. It really is a spectacular model for how to work together with two different partners along with the National Park Service, so three partners, and I can't think of better folks to work with than both of those groups. So it's good all the way around, and thank you for making that happen and for setting this up. I wish you guys could be here. I promise you will have a good time. Plan your trip to Death Valley. Look forward to your visit once we reopen, so you got to wait till Friday. And thanks, Kevin. I look forward to the questions.
Thanks so much, Mike. It's been fun. Thanks for all you're doing there at Death Valley, both you and David. It's been great working with you. Thanks for protecting the park resources and serving the visitors. And now it's time for some Q&A. So Katie, lead us into the Q&A, please.
Sure thing. We have a lot of really great questions, so everybody stick around because I think we have questions for every single one of our panelists here. The first question actually was a write-in ahead of time. Kathy Rose wanted to know, is there a park botanist and are there really rare plants in Death Valley, such as the bear poppy, Panamint daisy, I'm sorry if I butchered the name here, Gilmania and Tetracoccus, and are those being monitored and protected?
That's a Kevin question. I don't know if Kevin can maybe be more specific about plants. I can answer a little bit. I don't know how this works, if everybody can hear me. This is Mike. Yes, we have lots of rare plants here, as you would expect when you range from below sea level all the way up to 11,000 feet. And of course, it's limited rainfall at the valley floor, 1.9 inches. But as you go up and up, there's more rain, and there's lots of leftover riparian areas in a lot of the canyons near the springs. So there's all kinds of vegetation. Panamint daisy is certainly a extremely rare favorite. We have multiple listed species on the Endangered Species Act. However, I don't know, Kevin, if you know more about some of those specific species that Rose mentioned.
Right. So the two main species that the park monitors and has been monitoring for some time, over a decade, 15 years, is the Eureka dunes grass and the Eureka primrose, like you mentioned. But there are other projects that do monitor other teeny species with researchers. But those are the two main park staff that are focusing on. And we do have an ecologist botanist, Allie Ainsworth. So, yeah.
Dr. Ainsworth.
Great, thanks y'all. We've got a question from Tom Bliss asking, when does Scotty's Castle reopen?
Yeah, I'll jump in and take this one. It's actually excellent timing. Tomorrow morning we'll know that answer. So what we've been saying is October of 2021 is when we've been planning and hoping to reopen. There was a shutdown a year ago that derailed some projects. Now we don't dealing with COVID, that we still don't know how much it's impacting everything. So officially, if you go on our website tonight, the answer is October of 21. Probably tomorrow afternoon, we'll have an updated date that I don't know off the top of my head yet. So sorry, I don't have a great answer, but stay tuned on that. Realistically, from what I've been hearing little bits and pieces of, we don't think COVID massively derailed everything. So I'm hoping we won't have any major pushbacks from that. But COVID is just one piece of a really big puzzle of things that have to come together for the castle to reopen. However, although the castle might not generally be open to the public, the castle does open every winter for specialized tours led or sponsored and organized by the Death Valley Natural History Association. So you can come see the castle in a couple months.
Great, thanks, Patrick. We have a question specifically for Mike. What do you do for fun at Death Valley?
That's easy. I go hiking every weekend. I just finished hiking about my 6,000th mile in Death Valley. So I'm trying to see it all, which I've determined is absolutely completely impossible. It's 3.4 million acres, which is about the size of Connecticut. And even if you hike every weekend for the rest of your life, you will not see it all. But it is the best place I've ever found, where because the weather's always good, you just get to go hiking every weekend. So that's what I like to do for fun.
Great. Another follow-up question for Mike. You mentioned the pronghorn antelope entering the park. The question is Death Valley part of a wildlife corridor? And if so, where does it go?
I'm going to defer that question to Dr. Kevin Wilson, who is a wildlife specialist, a wet wildlife specialist.
Well, I'll try to put on a wildlife hat, but so the park has spotted pronghorn down farther in the southern portions down near Cow Creek that have never been reported before. And there could be various reasons for that. That could be due to precipitation and food availability. They're finding places to eat. And also it could be that there's not as many people out there, and so they're a skittish animal. So with COVID, that they might be a little bit more willing to move. But as a corridor, migratory corridor, that hasn't been determined yet. But researchers are interested in that.
Great, and that question had come from Marcia. We have an anonymous question. Is there much backpacking and rock climbing in the park?
So I would say there's some. If you're saying is there much and you're comparing it to like Yosemite or Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, probably, well, definitely not to those levels. We don't have a lot of specified routes. So it's much more of a spot where people come and either vacation primarily by car and do short 2-hour hikes, or people that are like hardcore wilderness. I don't want a route. I don't need a map. I'm going to go do this on my own, go explore. We do have one specified route called the Cottonwood Marble Loop that's like a 2 or 3 night overnight backpacking trip that's pretty popular and growing pretty fast in popularity. So yeah, people do it, but probably not to the same level that you associate with some of the other national parks. And a lot of that is just because unless you really know where the water is, it gets complicated to pack enough water in Death Valley to backpack for a couple days.
Great, thank you. We have a question about Devil's Hole. Kevin, what made the chasm? Was it an earthquake?
So it used to be a fully formed cave, and about 60,000 years ago, it collapsed. And they did this by doing cores into the calcite to determine when it was exposed to the atmosphere. The reason for its collapse, it was probably geologic. Devil's Hole was formed by a geologic fault, so it's a different type of cave than, say, back east, where the water is eroding away a dissolution cave. So the geology is most likely the reason why it collapsed thousands of years ago.
Great, and we got another one for you here, Kevin. What are the theories regarding the diminishing pupfish?
That's a good question. That's why I still hopefully have a job. Basically, there's a suggestion that there was a food item that was popular 25, 30 years ago that was found in their guts. And then for my master's 20 years ago, we could not find it. And there's also a temperature component. So on that shelf, it's shallow in portions. If the maximum peak temperature gets much higher, it could, you know, kill the eggs. There's also, because it's a small population, there's the genetic bottleneck component. So it's not a smoking gun. There's probably a few things that are interacting for the pupfish not to do so well. But we do supplementally feed them to hopefully give them a chance to, for us humans to figure it out, or for them just to do it on their own.
Great, thanks, Kevin. This one may go to you as well, and you may have already addressed this a little bit with the pronghorn, but the question from Terry is, have rangers noticed a difference in park wildlife since the park was closed for COVID? Sorry, Kevin, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I think, you know, Mike's been out hiking around. He might be able to speak to the wildlife that he's been seeing more frequently.
Boy, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I feel like there have been quite a few impacts. I mean, certainly the pronghorn, which probably migrated here independent of limited visitation, but like Kevin said, they're super shy, and so things have been more visible than they might not have been before. What's also been interesting is all of the wildlife that had become human adapted. So, for example, the coyotes and the ravens that are dependent on the campers and the people that are hanging out at the restaurants at Furnace Creek, they're not able to get the human crafted food, and so they've become more and more visible as they're starving. And so the human impacted wildlife is certainly even more impacted now. But in the backcountry, you know, Death Valley typically in the backcountry doesn't see a lot of visitors. Most of the visitors are in the front country. So I wouldn't say a massive difference, but definitely places you go there, you know, without visitors, there have to be significant impacts. Yeah.
Good.
Great, thanks, Mike. This is probably a question for you. How many employees does the National Park Service have in Death Valley? And are they all full-time or are some of them seasonal?
That's a great question. So because of the really complicated, mysterious, baffling hiring process and funding process, so our funding, as you know, I'll answer your question shortly. Our funding comes in one-year batches, and it's not enough to run the park. So we therefore have to chase lots and lots of other fund sources that are either short-term or mid-term, or they're grants, or they're working with partners like Fund for People in Parks and David Blacker, or that are project specific. So let's say you get a project specific thing to fix a sewer line, and that comes with a blop of money that lasts a couple of years. You might hire a crew that lasts a couple of years to do that project. And so those are all a little bit cyclic. So plus we have a lot of interns, we have seasonal employees at different times throughout the year. We have tons of volunteers that come here, particularly in the winter, things like campground hosts and helping out in different ways. So we have about 150 people working here in the middle of winter, and we have about 100 people here working in the summer, of people that are year round.
Great, thanks, Mike. We have one more question here. Folks, if you have other questions you'd like to ask, go ahead and type them in now, or you can raise your hand. The final question currently is also from Tom Bliss. He asks, do the rangers interact with the Indians? I'm imagining he's asking about American Indians.
Yeah, actually, I'll take that question if that's okay. So the Shoshone tribe has a village right here at Furnace Creek. So about a half mile from where we're standing is the, you can almost show it. Yeah, we can see the sign from here. So the Shoshone village, which was created in the Shoshone Homeland Act of 2000, is a private village where a tribe lives. And Death Valley National Park is lucky to be the only national park with a tribe living within its boundaries. And so also, not just because of the Homeland Act of 2000, which mandated a relationship, because the tribe is proximate and they've been here since time immemorial, which means something like a long time. We have a unique relationship with this particular tribe. So there are federal requirements for when you do a plan, you're supposed to send it to the tribes that are affiliated, and they review it and give you comments back. And it's a very formal process. But because the tribe sits right next to our boundary, we actually have meetings almost on a weekly basis with tribal members who attend our planning meetings, attend our even, some of them are even associated with our employee functions and things like that, in an attempt to try to get input from the tribe earlier in the process. I mean, these folks have been here for forever and often have a much better insight than some of us do about some of the natural things that are occurring in the park. And I would love to somebody to ask the same question to one of the tribal members about wildlife interactions with people, and if it's different now that visitation has been zero for a couple of months, because I think we'd have a more interesting response. But yeah, we're super lucky to have that relationship with the Shoshone tribe here in Death Valley.
Thanks, Mike. Looks like we don't have any more questions. We had a couple people chime in and say thank you so much, and one person said, I wish I could applaud. So I will echo that. Kevin Hendricks unfortunately had some hardware issues and dropped off the call, so he wanted to wish a very big thank you to all of our supporters for making everything we do possible, for supporting all of our national parks. I want to give thanks to the staff at Death Valley, Mike and Patrick, to David Blacker, to Kevin Wilson. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Couldn't do this sort of thing without you. This is a great team to be working with. So thank you all. Have a lovely evening.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.